Thank you very much, Kalle Buschmann, for inviting me to speak here today. My name is Johannes Pietsch. I'm an expert in historic textiles and dress, and I've curated this exhibition, Taschen, the Bag, a cultural history from the 16th to the 21st century. So today I'm going to show you some types of historic bags and also tell you about the origins of the lady's handbag, an object that is not quite as ancient as you might think. In fact, for centuries, men as well as women carried bags. But I would also like to make you understand how you can profit from museums and from the work that we do. The Bayerisches Nationalmuseum houses a huge collection of objects from 2 millenniums of European art and culture. And in its current special exhibition, it is presenting its entire collection of historic bags and purses for the first time. So there are about 250 pieces that are shown here, plus 50 handbags and loan from the 1920s up to today. So that's the exhibition. Throughout history, people have used bags as containers for small personal objects, money and papers, and as these, basically all kinds of things that they wanted to carry with them at all times. So as these bags were used to hold personal items, they became very personal items themselves. Now, the earliest bags in our collection can be dated to the 16th century. In this time, men and women wore money bags and money pouches for their money and small personal belongings. Men's bags were attached directly to the belt, as you can see on the right. Women kept their money in bags and purses that were hung on long straps and dangled down in front of their skirts. And especially men and women from the bourgeois class showed their wealth with these bags that were worn visibly on the garment. So a bursting purse was a true status symbol. In the 17th century, men and women kept coins in small drawstring purses that they put in the large pockets of their wide skirts and breeches. So now the purses were carried inside the garments. They could be richly decorated, so today very often it's impossible to tell whether they originally belonged to a man or a woman, because before the French Revolution, men and women wore equally elaborate clothes with a lot of embroideries and lace, etc. Contemporary designers can look backwards and be inspired by historic objects like these beautiful drawstring purses. This is really clever because for thousands of years people have tried to find the best ways of creating practical and at the same time beautiful objects, and they've come up with some amazing creations. So you should use these centuries of experience for your own work and profit from the past. Having been trained as a fashion designer myself, I know how important it is to know the history of dress. And the best designers, and not just fashion designers, but basically designers of all kinds, they know history by heart. And this gives them a great advantage over those who don't. And it saves a lot of time and energy because you don't have to reinvent everything. It's not necessary. Be inspired by historic objects and play with the ideas that you find in them. Okay? And this is where museums come in. For example, our museum was founded in 1855, and since then it has been collecting artifacts of the highest quality. So with its objects, it offers some of the best solutions to aesthetic and technical problems. Bags in the drawstring shape have been known since ancient times. And here you can see that a contemporary designer at the House of Chanel reinterpreted this idea to create a fashionable shoulder bag. Now this painting and the bag here, they are wonderful examples of objects of very high quality in our museum. Large so-called game bags that were used for hunting were typical men's bags. They were richly decorated because hunting was a noble privilege, so this is shown in these bags. And this example here belonged to Elector Maximilian I of Bavaria. With this bag, he signaled that he had the power and the means to have himself such a precious and beautiful object made. In the painting, you can see the typical colors that were used in early 17th century art, and this can also be an inspiration for today. Now, this is another form of bag that is still in use today. Letter cases were introduced around 1650 because after the end of the 30 Years' War, the postal system was expanded and people wrote more and more letters that they carried in these letter cases. This is a slightly different shape of a letter case that can be folded in the middle, and on the right you can see the inside of it. In the 1780s and 90s, bold yet sophisticated color combinations were all the rage. You are maybe surprised about these crazy colors. And they became fashionable because people in Europe looked to the East for inspiration. For example, to the countries of the Ottoman Empire like Turkey or Persia, or even to Asia. That's not so different from today, is it? Now, what do these letter cases remind us of? Of course, the clutch bag that is one of today's most popular shapes for a woman's handbag. Here the inspiration from the past is rather obvious, but not only shapes can be reused directly. I'm rather talking about inspiration in a broader sense. Proportions, technical details, colors, materials are all single elements that you can use for your own creative work. It can be anything, something abstract like the curves of a masterly draping in a sculpture, or a specially treated surface of a piece of metalwork, anything. Now let's go back to our bags. These are the regular bags for women in the 18th century. These large pockets could be tied around the waist, and over them the dress was put on. It had side openings so the women could reach into the pockets. And ladies stored the equipment for their needlework in work bags, but they could also carry other small items in them. And as you can see, they are made like drawstring bags with silk ribbons, so they could be worn hanging over the arm. They're so interesting because these are the very first forerunners of the modern handbag. Around 1800, women wore soft flowing muslin dresses, and under these they couldn't tie any large pockets around their waist anymore. So they remembered the work bags and they carried them in the hand. First they had this shape of the drawstring handbag, and soon they became smaller and flatter and were carried on a short chain. They became true fashionable accessories and were called ridicules in French. Very often they were just pretty but didn't have much practical value, so this was very often a little ridiculous. This elegant ridicule is one of my favorite bags in the exhibition. Although it looks so simple, its design is exquisite. The proportions of the single elements are well balanced. The materials are exclusive of silk fabric, silk fringe and silk cord, and all in the same color. And the whole bag is mounted on a mahogany disc, so it's very simple, but it looks rather modern, I think. The string with which it is carried also serves to fasten the flap, and I'm showing it to you because it's a good example of how a successful design can be reinterpreted by looking backwards. A very similar way of fastening can be seen here in this 1930s handbag. It was worn by Marlene Dietrich, the famous actress, and the designer in the 1930s was obviously inspired by the past, and today, after so many years, we still admire this extraordinary design and we can learn from it. Around 1840, the small ridicules came out of fashion, but at the same time, a new type of bag was developed, the travel bag. With the invention of the railway, more people were able to travel, and the way of traveling changed. The large, bulky luggage was stored in a separate wagon, and women still wanted to carry certain things with them, so these travel bags were developed. They had to be capacious. They were provided with a metal frame, and as a very new feature, they had short handles, because now the ladies had to carry them themselves. Then the women got used to carrying a bag on handles, and so the handbag was developed and now was finally, or for the first time, called handbag. And this is a rather early example for such a handbag. At first they were very small, but then around 1800 such a model developed that we still know today as a handbag in simple leather design, in practical size, and still with a metal frame and a leather handle, and this could be worn daily. And for more elegant occasions, there were metal mesh bags. And at last, in the 1920s, the handbags became fashionable and practical fashion accessories. It was then that the first fashion designers started creating handbags, and women wore different handbags for different outfits, so they were really practical fashion accessories. This is a German handbag from 1938 with its simple and practical shape and the special way of fastening. It looks rather modern, I think, although it's 75 years old. In the 1950s, plastic handbags like these were very popular and were also exported to Europe. Today they are sought after collectors' items. Now all the historic bags were handmade and were unique pieces, but today there are still people who make unique bags. So this, for example, are creations by Bettina von Reiswitz. They stand out by their precise shapes, by their functionality, and by the sensual treatment of the leather. She uses very traditional techniques in high craftsmanship to create designs in contemporary shape. And now here, this is a handbag by Cécile Feichenfeld. She lives and works in Paris. She has designed this handbag and created it exclusively for our exhibition, and she told me that she was actually inspired by historic bags. So it's really nice how this can work. So this is the inspiration from the past, and this was just a quick overview of our exhibition. But I've also shown you these bags to make you realize how contemporary designers, how creative people today can use historic objects as creative sources, as inspiration. Now, I would like to give you an advice. Go to museums and look at the artifacts. Our world is full of images. Our culture has become an image-based culture. I've shown you a lot of images myself, but don't forget that you can easily be deceived by images. Later, you're going to see the bags in the exhibition, and you're going to meet them in real life, so to say, and you will find out what a different kind of experience this is. People who have seen the bags on the internet or in the catalog very often come to me when they have actually been in the exhibition and tell me, oh, I was surprised that a certain bag was much smaller than I had thought, or much bigger, or that it was amazing how tiny some of the embroidery stitches were, etc., etc. And I'm sure you're going to have a similar kind of experience then, because even in the best photographs, the true texture and volume of an object cannot be rendered. So I would like to encourage you to have a close look at the artifacts, at the originals. Open your eyes and sharpen your senses. Take, for example, a famous painting that you seem to know very well because it's reproduced everywhere, everyone knows all the reproductions. When you go and look at it in a museum, you will be amazed what the real work of art has to offer you. There's all the texture, there's really all the magic that a digital or printed image cannot provide. And this is basically what the museum is about. Here is the place where you can see the real stuff of the highest quality. And the best thing is, it's great fun to discover these treasures. It's not boring at all, it's exciting. And this is why we museums people are so passionate about what we do. So go to museums, look at artifacts. By looking backwards, you can gain so much. You can discover a whole world, a whole universe of ideas that you can play with for your own creative work. Learn from those who worked before you. It's so important to understand the past and where we come from in order to get along in the present and be able to cope with the future, right? So go to museums as often as possible and use them as sources of inspiration for your own creative work. Thank you very much.